My name is Helen Carter. I'm 46 years old. I've never been married. I have no children. And according to my sister Rachel, that makes me the family's forgotten chapter. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe it was, and I just didn't know how to name it. The night it finally shattered into something I couldn't ignore was her 20th wedding anniversary party. The kind of celebration that gets planned by hired people. The kind with string lights in the garden, live acoustic music under a tent, floral arrangements tall enough to block the person sitting across from you. Everything was soft gold and curated. I wore a simple navy dress and a pair of flats that had seen better days. I brought a card and a gift that took me 2 weeks of budgeting to afford. I came early to help. I stayed late to clean. At one point, while Rachel and James were mingling with guests, someone handed them a microphone to say a few words. Rachel always did love a spotlight. She clinked her glass with that performer's smile she'd been perfecting since we were kids. James just stood beside her, smiling in the way that men do when they've learned to live around a woman's orbit. And then she said it. We're so grateful for all the love and support from friends, family, and of course, my big sister Helen. She turned to me, her arm outstretched in mock gratitude. Helen's always been the responsible one. The one who never needed anyone. Or maybe just too picky to ever find someone willing to sign up for all this. People chuckled. Then came the blow that didn't even sound like one unless you were me. She'll probably end up with 10 cats and a memoir, and honestly, that's so on brand for her. Laughter erupted like someone had told a joke worth remembering. A few heads turned to look at me with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I smiled too. The kind of smile that seals up the hurt just enough to make it home without falling apart in the car. And in that moment I became exactly what they thought I was. Not Helen. The woman who spent 10 years taking care of our dying mother, while Rachel was off living her Pinterest-perfect life. Not the woman who worked 2 jobs to keep the mortgage paid on our childhood home when Dad died and Mom fell apart. Not the woman who gave up her graduate scholarship to come home because someone had to. And it was always me. No. In that moment I was just the spinster sister. The punchline. The one you nod at politely and then move past. I went inside to the kitchen, partly to clear my head, partly to avoid crying in public. The sink was already full of wine glasses with lipstick stains, and the scent of lemon chicken still lingered in the air. I began rinsing dishes without thinking. Reflex. Habit. Distraction. Rachel walked in briefly, reapplying her lipstick in the hallway mirror, not even acknowledging me. That's how it always was. I was part of the background like the tablecloths or the guest book. Useful. Invisible. And then James walked in. He didn't say anything at first, just leaned quietly against the counter as I worked. I could feel his eyes on me before I heard his voice. "You're always the one cleaning up," he said softly. I shrugged, not looking at him. "Someone has to." He paused, then added, "You looked really hurt earlier." I dried my hands, finally turning to face him. Rachel's always had a sharp tongue. I'm used to it. But that doesn't mean it's okay. There was a silence between us. Not awkward, just heavy. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. "I should have said something. Back then. And now." My chest tightened. Back then. He didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, he opened a drawer near the fridge, the one full of random family junk. Batteries, old birthday candles, coupons from 3 years ago. He pulled out an old photo album. Faded green cover. Edges worn. My mother's handwriting on a post-it still clinging to the front. "She was going to throw this away," he said. "Thought maybe you'd want it." He placed it in my hands and walked out without another word. I sat down on the stool by the window, the one where Mom used to drink her morning tea. I ran my fingers over the spine of the album. Part of me didn't want to open it. But something tugged at me, that old buried instinct that told me, you're about to find something you were never meant to see. On the fourth page, between a photo of me in my high school graduation cap and one of Rachel on her wedding day, was an envelope. No name, no return address, just an envelope. I hesitated. Something about it made my skin go cold, like touching a bruise you forgot you had. I opened it, and inside was a letter, folded once. Thick, elegant paper. My mother's handwriting. Not addressed to me. Not to Rachel. Just a letter. I read the first few lines and froze. Because in that letter, my mother had written something that would unravel every version of the past I thought was true. And it all began with 7 words. James was meant to marry you first. They say hindsight is 20/20th. But when I read that letter, when I saw my mother's tidy cursive admitting that James had first proposed to me, not Rachel, it wasn't clarity I felt. It was grief. Not the kind you cry through. The kind that sits in your lungs like ash. Heavy. Quiet.
Familiar.
Because suddenly all those years I thought I'd chosen to step aside, to take care of our mother, to live a quiet life, to not chase love like Rachel did, they weren't choices. They were sacrifices made for me, or to me. I had been erased in ways I didn't even know were happening. And it didn't start with James. It started decades earlier. In a house where my silence was treated like virtue, and Rachel's noise was celebrated as charm. We grew up in a 2-bedroom home in eastern Connecticut. Modest, cluttered, warm in winter but full of drafts in the fall. I was the older sister by 2 years. I was also the quieter one, the self-soother, the good girl, the one who read in corners and cleaned up without being asked. Rachel was pure light, wild, laughing, magnetic, and when she wanted something, she got it. I still remember the year I turned 12. Our mother forgot my birthday entirely. No card,
No cake.
When I finally mentioned it around bedtime, she looked up from her newspaper and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you're not the type to care about birthdays, are you?" I told her it was fine, and then I cried myself to sleep. By the time I was 17, I was doing most of the cooking. When Mom had her first health scare, it was me who learned how to measure her insulin, monitor her blood pressure, and coax her into eating. Rachel was already in theater club and dating senior boys who drove terrible cars and played acoustic guitar. When I got into a university 3 states away, I remember holding the acceptance letter in my hands like it was something sacred. My guidance counselor had called me a scholarship miracle. But when I told Mom, her face tightened. Rachel needs you, and I won't be able to manage without help. You'll go to the community college nearby. That's a smarter choice anyway. I nodded. I always nodded. James came into the picture when I was 24. I was still living at home, still helping with Mom, still balancing 2 jobs. He was Rachel's classmate in an evening art history seminar, but he came into the library one day while I was shelving returned books. We got to talking. He came back the next day, and the next. He was kind, patient, the kind of man who remembered what books you liked and made jokes without trying to dominate a room. And for a while, I let myself believe that I could have something just for me. He asked me out. I said yes. I didn't tell Rachel. For 2 months we had something quiet, soft, real. Until one day he just stopped showing up. No text. No call.
No goodbye.
He ghosted me before ghosting had a name. Rachel claimed she had no idea what happened. Maybe he wasn't serious, she shrugged. Men like that never really are. And then just a few months later she brought him home, smiling, holding his hand, introducing him as her boyfriend. I remember the way my chest tightened. I asked if it was the same James. She laughed. Don't be weird. You and James? Please. I never said a word. I buried it, like everything else. But that letter, The one tucked between the photo of my graduation and her wedding day, it told a different story. It said James had first asked to speak to Mom about courting me. He wanted to do things the old-fashioned way. But Rachel had overheard the conversation. And before James could tell me, she confronted him, saying I wasn't emotionally stable. That I'd once threatened to hurt myself during a breakup in college. A complete lie. Mom, worried about appearances and family reputation, told James that I wasn't a good match. That I was delicate, moody, too intense. Rachel, of course, was the opposite. Light, playful, uncomplicated. So, James turned, and I never knew. I sat with that letter for over an hour. Read it again. And again. It was signed at the bottom, just one line. You were always the stronger one, Helen. That's why I let them take what was yours. I thought you wouldn't break. That was my mother's idea of a confession. She let them take him from me because she thought I'd survive it better. And maybe she was right. I did survive. I survived through decades of being told I was too much and never enough all at once. I survived being the daughter who sacrificed and never got thanked. The sister who kept secrets that burned like acid. I survived nights where the house was full of people but I still felt like a ghost. But surviving is not the same as living. And now, finally, the truth was starting to crack open the coffin I'd been buried in. Not all at once. Not with rage. But with slow, trembling breath. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking at Rachel with envy. I was looking at her with clarity. Because now I understood. She didn't just steal James. She stole my narrative. She made herself the protagonist of my story, and convinced everyone I was just an extra. And yet, as I folded the letter and slid it back into its envelope, one thought kept repeating itself. She thinks she's already won. She doesn't even know the war has started. The letter didn't let me sleep. It sat on my nightstand for 2 nights. Unopened again but never unread. Like it had a pulse. Like it could whisper. Every time I reached to throw it away, something in me stopped. A small voice, the kind I used to ignore for the sake of peace, kept saying, "Not yet. You're not done." By the 3rd morning I did something I hadn't done in years. Called in sick. I didn't even lie. I just told my supervisor, I need a day. And for the first time in my life I didn't apologize for it. I spent the morning sorting through the photo album James had given me. There were snapshots from every year, birthdays, awkward Christmases, vacations we could barely afford. And threaded through it all was something I had never noticed before. Me. In the background. Always holding someone else's coat. Always halfway out of the frame. Always blurred or blinking or mid-task. I wasn't in the pictures. I was around them. Even in my own memories I was peripheral. Until I reached the back of the album. A section with no labels, no decorations. Just loose photos and a manila envelope that had been tucked between 2 blank pages. It wasn't the same envelope from the other night. This one was heavier. Newer. Clean edges. But sealed. And on the front, in unmistakable handwriting, were 5 words that knocked the air out of my lungs. For Helen. After I'm gone. It was my mother's writing. But this wasn't the voice of a woman who apologized. This was something else. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk it straight to the fire pit in the backyard. But something deeper, something newly awake, told me to read. So I did. Inside were 3 things. The first was a letter. Not long. Not emotional. Just exact. You may not understand why I did what I did. But I need you to know I saw everything. I always saw you. Even when I pretended not to. Rachel needed the spotlight. But you carried the world. You buried your dreams so your sister could chase hers. I let it happen. I encouraged it. James was yours. I took him from you. I knew you wouldn't fight back. You never did. But before I left this earth, I made one decision just for you. The second item was a copy of a property deed. I blinked then blinked again. It was a historic property, a beautiful house on Emerson Lane, owned by our grandmother's family. I'd only been there twice as a child before it went into a trust. Rachel always said it had been sold off. But this deed said otherwise. It was signed, notarized, and dated just 3 months before our mother passed. And it was in my name. Only my name. No one had told me. No one had even hinted. Not even the lawyer at the will reading. The third item was a photograph. Black and white. From the early 2000s. I recognized it instantly. It was the only photo ever taken of James and me. We were sitting outside a bookstore cafe, his hand resting on mine. My smile open, unguarded, real. I had forgotten that smile. On the back of the photo in fading ink was a single line. He loved you. I buried it. I can't unearth it now. But maybe you can. I sat on the floor of my bedroom for what felt like hours, the letter spread out beside me, the deed in my hand, the photograph like a ghost pressed against my knee. I thought about how many years I had spent shrinking. How many nights I had swallowed grief that didn't have a name. How I told myself that I just wasn't meant for great love or a family, or happiness that sparkled in the way Rachel's always seemed to. But the truth was far more cruel and far more liberating. It wasn't fate. It was orchestration. Rachel didn't just get lucky. She designed her life by dismantling mine. With my mother's help. And James? The man who stood beside her for 20 years, the man who handed me that photo album, he had known. At least part of it. And still said nothing. That night he called. His name lit up my phone screen, and I let it ring 5 times before answering. Hello. He sounded hesitant. Softer than I remembered. Can we talk? He asked. Alone. Just for a few minutes. I could have said no. I could have screamed or cried or slammed the phone down. But instead I said, tomorrow. At noon. The cafe near Main Street. He let out a breath, maybe relief, maybe dread. Thank you. I hung up before he could say anything else. The next morning I printed a copy of the letter. I folded it into my purse next to the deed and the photograph. I wasn't sure yet if I'd show him any of it. But I needed to see his eyes. I needed to see what lived there now. I needed to know if he remembered loving me, or if that memory had been buried, like everything else in this family, under years of carefully curated lies. Because now I understood. I had been edited out of my own life. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. I arrived 10 minutes early. Not because I was eager to see him, but because I wanted to sit at the window table, the one with the best light, the one where I could see him before he saw me. I ordered black coffee.
No sugar. No cream.
Just clarity. When James finally walked in, he looked older than I remembered. Thinner. Gray at the temples. A man who had worn the costume of a fulfilled life for too long. He spotted me and paused at the door. I held his gaze. I didn't smile. He walked over and sat across from me slowly, as if he was approaching a grave, not a woman. Thank you for coming, he said. I nodded once. You said you wanted to talk. So talk. He glanced at his hands, picked at the edge of his napkin. It struck me then how uncomfortable he was, and how familiar that made me feel. I had spent my entire life making others comfortable at the expense of my own skin. Not today. I should have told you this a long time ago, he began. I didn't know how. I didn't know if it mattered anymore. It mattered the moment you chose silence, I said. And every day after. He swallowed. I loved you, Helen. The words sat between us like an open wound.
No dramatics. No violin swell.
Just truth spoken too late. I was going to ask you to marry me, he continued. I told your mother. I wanted to surprise you. Do things properly. I said nothing. I let him sit in the echo of it. She told me you weren't well. That you'd had a breakdown once. That commitment would overwhelm you. She said I'd hurt you if I got too close. And Rachel. She told me you weren't interested. That you were embarrassed. I laughed, one short bitter sound. She told you I was embarrassed? Of you. He looked down. I know now it was a lie. I knew then something felt wrong. But I didn't push. You didn't push because Rachel made it easy not to, I said. She offered you the same story, just easier. Prettier. With fewer complications. He didn't argue. I was young, he said, almost pleading. I thought I was doing the right thing. Then things moved fast. Rachel was pregnant. I cut him off. So you settled. He winced. I stayed. I tried to make it work. For the kids. For her. And what about me? I asked. What was I supposed to make work? The silence. The stories. The humiliation of watching you marry my sister, while I stood there pretending I didn't know the truth. James went quiet. I always thought I was the one who wasn't enough, I said, softer now. That I just wasn't the kind of woman men chose. That love wasn't for people like me. But it wasn't that, was it? He shook his head.
No.
It was never that. We sat in silence. Not awkward. Not gentle. Just full. He finally spoke again. I'm leaving Rachel. I raised my eyebrows. Is that supposed to impress me?
No.
Just the truth. I'm not asking you to take me back, Helen. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted to finally give you what you were owed. The truth. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had once held my hand outside that bookstore cafe. The man whose silence buried me. The man who now sat across from me like he was asking for something he couldn't name. You didn't come here for me, I said. You came here because you couldn't live with what you did anymore. And that's not the same thing. His face crumpled just slightly. I don't hate you, I added. But I don't pity you either. I pulled the photograph from my purse, the one of us younger, softer. I placed it on the table between us. He looked down at it like it hurt to remember. You could have built something with me, I said. Instead, you built a lie with her. Then I stood up. And before I left, I looked him in the eye and said the truest thing I had ever said out loud. I may not have had a husband, James. But I have never been loveless. I just stopped looking for love in people who needed me to disappear in order to shine. Outside, the air was cold but clean. I walked slowly, feeling every step in my bones. Not like a burden, like a return. For the first time in decades, I felt real. Not polished. Not small. Not just the sister. Just Helen. And that was enough. The lawyer's office smelled like stale coffee and old leather. The kind of place where secrets are hidden in manila folders and polite voices. Rachel arrived 20 minutes late in a cream pantsuit, sunglasses still on indoors, laughing too loudly into her phone before breezing past the receptionist with a flick of her wrist. Sorry, traffic, she said, as if time bent to her convenience. She greeted the room like a hostess, not a grieving daughter. Kissed distant cousins on the cheek. Whispered something that made Aunt Marian titter behind her hand. I sat at the far end of the table. No one offered me a chair closer to the center. I didn't ask for one. James was nowhere in sight. I didn't expect him to come. The lawyer, Mr. Lennox, cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. I know Diana's passing has left a void. Rachel cut in. Let's just get to the reading, shall we? I'm due at the country club by 3. He blinked, thrown, but continued. What followed was what I expected at first. The will began with pleasantries. To my beloved daughters Rachel and Helen. But as Mr. Lennox moved down the page, It became clear Rachel wasn't just getting the lion's share. She was getting everything. The house, the bank accounts, the jewelry, the antique piano, all of it. And to my daughter Helen, I leave my gratitude for her unwavering care during my final years. That was it. Not a trinket. Not a letter. Not even a book from the dusty shelf of my childhood room. Just gratitude. Rachel didn't even hide her smirk. She reached over, patted my hand like a school principal dealing with a student who failed gym class. "Oh, Helen," she said, voice dripping fake concern. I'm sure she meant well. Maybe there's a clerical error. I said nothing. My chest was burning. Mr. Lennox cleared his throat again. "There is one more item. A separate file Diana requested be given privately to Helen. Not part of the formal will." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Privately?" He nodded. "Per her instructions." He opened a side drawer and handed me a thick envelope sealed in wax. I tucked it into my bag without opening it. My hands were steady, but my pulse was pounding so loud I could barely hear the rest of the room. Rachel was already flipping through the property inventory, humming to herself. She was circling the house on Emerson Lane with a pen like she was claiming her favorite toy. I stood up. "You're leaving?" Rachel asked, fake shocked. I looked at her for a long time. The woman who had stolen my mother's attention, my future, my love, and turned it into a curated fairy tale with me edited out. "I got what I came for," I said quietly. She scoffed. "A manila folder and a thank you? Dream big, sis."
Not I.
No scene. Just a soft nod. "I am." And then I walked out. Outside, I sat in my car with the engine off. The envelope rested in my lap like a live wire. This wasn't the first time I'd been erased, but it was the first time it was done on paper. Legally. Publicly. Even the lawyer hadn't looked me in the eye. I had been the nursemaid, the errand runner, the one who made sure Mom took her pills, who bathed her when her hands gave out, who signed the hospital forms when no one else showed up. And now I was a footnote in my own mother's legacy. But the envelope in my bag said otherwise. I drove home. Slowly. Carefully. Like I was carrying something fragile that might crack open the world again. I didn't open it that night. I lit a candle. I made tea. I stood in the doorway of the spare room, still filled with old boxes labeled Rachel College, Rachel Wedding, Rachel Baby Shower. There was not a single box with my name on it. And yet something inside me whispered, that's about to change. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. A handwritten letter, longer than the one I'd found before, more detailed, and not at all apologetic. If you're reading this, it means Rachel got what she wanted. But so did you. I know what I've done. And I'm not asking for forgiveness. I was afraid. Afraid of losing control. Of seeing you outshine your sister, who needed more scaffolding than truth. So I clipped your wings. Repeatedly. I told myself it was for your own good. But the truth is, I didn't believe you'd ever fight for yourself. I was wrong. A second certified deed, this time, notarized with witness signatures and legally binding documentation. The property on Emerson Lane, the family estate Rachel had salivated over since she was 12, was mine. Transferred into my name by our mother 3 months before her death. With the clause, not to be disclosed until the formal will has been read. A photo of me as a teenager standing on the porch of that house, smiling. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, you were always home. I just didn't know how to honor that. I sat there, sunlight pouring across the table, the world suddenly rebalanced. Rachel had her curated legacy, the fake jewelry, the house full of memories I didn't want. But I had something more. I had the one thing that had always been denied to me, Not wealth, not affection, not James. Autonomy. This house. This decision. This moment was mine. I wasn't erased. I was withheld. And now I was done waiting to be chosen. The house on Emerson Lane had always been a myth in our family. The ancestral gem with wraparound porches and ivy-draped pillars, once owned by our great-grandmother and later turned into a summer rental before falling into legal limbo. Rachel used to call it the crown jewel of our family history. She had dreams of flipping it into an upscale Airbnb, or using it for her influencer retreats. All hashtags and curated breakfasts. But now it was mine. Not through manipulation. Not through charm. Not even through a fight. It was mine because for once, someone in the family had recognized where the true legacy belonged, even if it came too late for her to admit it out loud. I drove out on a Wednesday morning, deed in hand. The property sat quiet and weathered at the edge of a tree-lined road, just far enough from town to feel sacred but not forgotten. The porch creaked under my feet as I stepped up to the door. A faded blue like someone had once tried to make it cheerful. The key turned easily, as if it had been waiting. The air inside smelled of dust and memory. Faint echoes of soap, old wood, and time. There were still sheets over the furniture, stacks of books on a side table, a photo of my grandmother half-faded on the mantel. No one had been here in years. But nothing felt abandoned. It felt paused. Like the house had been holding its breath for me. I spent the next month clearing it out. Not just dusting. Not just repainting walls. But purging ghosts. Rachel didn't know. I didn't tell her. Let her think she had won with her designer handbags and the marble kitchen our mother left her. Let her gloat over Facebook photos and wine-soaked brunches. I had something else now. A space that didn't ask me to shrink. A home where no one interrupted me. Where no one dismissed me with a smile. Where I could walk barefoot across the wooden floors and not worry that someone was tracking my every move, waiting to make a joke out of it. And as I painted the walls, opened the windows, and replaced broken things piece by piece, an idea began to grow. A quiet one, but steady. For years I had poured everything I had into others. My time, my labor, my silence. And when I was no longer useful, I was discarded, quietly, politely, the way women often are. But what if I could build something from that? Not revenge. Not punishment. Redirection. I began making calls. Reaching out to the local women's center. Then to a few women I knew from caregiving groups, single mothers, widows, women who had been left out of wills, marriages, legacies. Women who, like me, had given everything, and been thanked with crumbs. And slowly, I began turning the house on Emerson Lane into something new. A sanctuary. Not a shelter. Not a hotel. A retreat. A place where women over 40, women who had been erased by children, husbands, sisters, society, could come for a weekend or a week or longer and breathe. No mirrors unless they wanted them. No scales. No judgment. Just books, gardens, strong tea, and rooms where they didn't have to ask permission to rest. I funded it myself slowly, quietly. I sold off my own jewelry, dipped into my savings, worked weekend shifts at the library. But I never asked Rachel for a cent. One day, while clearing out the attic, I found a box labeled Helen, not needed. It was filled with things I had long thought were lost. My college acceptance letter. A half-finished manuscript I'd written at 22. A photo of me and James, untouched this time. And at the bottom, a tiny worn ballet slipper. Mine. From when I was 6 and wanted to dance, before Mom told me to pick something more practical. I sat on the attic floor and cried. Not from grief. From recognition. I was real. I had always been real. The first guest arrived 5 months later. She was 62. A retired nurse. Her adult son had recently taken power of attorney behind her back to sell her house and manage her finances. She came with nothing but a weekend bag and a tremor in her hands that wouldn't stop. By the end of her stay, she was painting again. The next guest was a widowed woman who had raised 4 stepchildren, none of whom invited her to their weddings. She stayed for 10 days. Left a thank you note in the kitchen that said, "I remembered what silence without fear feels like. Thank you for giving me back my voice." Rachel didn't find out about the house until nearly a year later. She showed up unannounced in sunglasses and entitlement, standing at the gate like she still expected the world to revolve around her whims. "What is this?" she asked, eyes scanning the garden, the porch swing, the sign by the gate that read, "The Quiet Inheritance, a space for women who gave everything." I smiled. "It's where I finally came home." Her laugh was brittle. "Mom left you this place?" I nodded. "Legally. Fully. Silently." She scoffed. "You could have told me. I would have helped make it something useful." "It already is." I watched her face tighten. "You think this changes anything?" she snapped. "You're still alone. You're still Helen. The sad one. The invisible one." I met her eyes. "No," I said. "I'm the remembered one." It was late October when Rachel called. The sky was the color of smoke that afternoon, a kind of silver gray that blurred the trees into watercolor outlines. I was in the upstairs hallway, lighting the evening candles along the windowsill. One for every woman who had stayed at the Emerson Lane retreat. Each flame a name. A wound. A win. My phone buzzed on the table beside the sewing machine. I nearly didn't pick it up, but something told me to. Her name blinked on the screen like a memory I hadn't quite erased. "Rachel." She exhaled first. Then, after a long silence, "I need a place to stay. Just for a few days." There was no performative edge to her voice this time.
No sugar.
No false warmth. Just a woman who was unraveling. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't bad," she added quickly. "James left. Took everything. The house is being sold. I have nowhere else to go." The silence stretched between us. For the first time I let it sit. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I wanted to listen to what wasn't being said. Rachel had always needed control. Whether it was through her charm or her cruelty, she kept everyone in orbit around her moods. But today there was no orbit, no audience. Just a woman realizing her scaffolding had collapsed. "I've always helped you," she said, her voice a little sharper now. "You know that." And that's when it hit me, she still believed that. She believed she'd been generous, supportive, a sister. Because that's the story she had told herself, and the world for decades. I closed my eyes and remembered all the times I'd kept her secrets. All the nights I'd defended her to our mother. All the mornings I'd woken up early to fix her messes before anyone noticed. "I'm sorry you're struggling," I said quietly, "but I can't offer you a room here." The pause on the other end was thick and sharp. "You're refusing me?" "Yes." "You're serious?" "I am." "You're really going to turn your back on your own sister?" I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar. How quickly the narrative changed when I stopped playing my part. "No," I said. "I'm finally facing the truth. And the truth is, this house was never meant to carry your entitlement." She exhaled sharply. "I can't believe you're doing this." "I can," I replied. I could hear her pacing, could picture her in some borrowed guest room or overpriced hotel, stunned that the woman she used to humiliate was now drawing a line she couldn't cross. "You've changed," she spat. "You used to care about people." "I still do," I said. "But I don't confuse caring with self-erasure anymore." "God, you sound just like Mom," she muttered. And there it was. The final jab. You mean the version of Mom you constructed for everyone else to applaud? I asked. Because the one I knew was terrified of you falling apart, and she used me as the net. Silence. Then she whispered, almost too soft to catch. I don't have anyone else. It would have broken me once. That sentence. It would have pulled me back into the role of rescuer, a fixer, of the older sister who gave up pieces of herself so that Rachel could float. But now? Now I heard it for what it was, not a plea, a consequence. I'm not doing this out of bitterness, I said. But this house wasn't built for women who take. It's built for women who rebuild. For women who've been erased. For the ones who were never picked, never praised, never protected, but kept showing up anyway. You're saying I'm not welcome. I didn't flinch. I'm saying this time I decide what welcome looks like. She was quiet for a long time. Then she hung up. She didn't call back. She didn't text.
No emails.
No vague social media posts designed to guilt me by implication. Just silence. And instead of dreading it, I welcomed it. Because for the first time in my life, I hadn't second-guessed my no. That evening, I walked the perimeter of the garden. The sun was low and gold. The leaves above me were rustling in slow, private conversations. I thought about the version of me that would have folded, the one who would have put Rachel in the guest room, then made her tea, tucked in a throw blanket, and laid awake all night wondering if I was being too harsh, too cold, too unkind. But that woman no longer lived here. The woman who lived here now, she was building something. Not out of spite. Not out of revenge. Out of reverence. For herself. For all the women who had arrived at the house on Emerson Lane with nothing but a story no one had believed. I came back inside to find Joanne, our newest guest, in the kitchen making soup. She was 58, recently widowed, and had just been disinvited from her only grandson's birthday by her daughter-in-law, who thought she took up too much space. The night she arrived, she couldn't stop apologizing for existing. By her third evening, she was humming while she chopped vegetables. "Would you like some?" she asked, her face hopeful. I nodded. That sounds perfect. We sat in the candlelit dining room. No television.
No noise.
Just the sound of a woman being allowed to take up space, maybe for the first time in years. "You live here alone?" she asked. I smiled. "Not really. This house is full of voices." She sipped her soup, then glanced at me. "Do you have someone? You know, someone who waits for you?" I thought about James. About what we could have been and what we never were. I thought about all the holidays I spent setting tables for others. All the family dinners where I sat near the edge, filling plates but never being offered one first. And I realized something. I used to think I needed someone to save me, I said. But this house, these women, they didn't save me. They reminded me I was never lost. She smiled. "That's a different kind of love." "Yes," I said. "And it's the kind that lasts." That night, I lit the newest candle in the upstairs hallway. 27 flames flickered against the dark, their shadows dancing across the walls like whispers that had finally been heard. I placed the matchbox back in the drawer, and I stood there a moment longer, watching the soft light move like breath. Then I whispered, not to anyone in particular. This time I said no, and it echoed in my bones like freedom. The article came out on a Thursday morning. I didn't even know the exact date it was scheduled. Elise, the reporter, had said, sometime this month. I didn't expect much. Just a small piece in a local lifestyle magazine. Few photos. Maybe a paragraph buried between garden tips and Sunday brunch spots. But when I opened my email and saw the subject line, she turned grief into grace. The woman behind Emerson Lane's quiet revolution. My hands froze. I clicked. And there it was. A full-page feature. Black and white photography. Wide shots of the house, its wraparound porch lined with candles, a weathered sign near the gate that read, "The Quiet Inheritance." A place for women who gave everything and were left with nothing. Then there was me, captured mid-walk in the garden, face soft, not smiling but not sad either. Just seen. The piece was raw but respectful. Elise had kept her promise. She didn't sensationalize. She didn't rewrite me. She told the truth. She wrote, "This isn't a home for the broken. It's a resurrection ground. A place where forgotten women remember who they were before the silence began." And at the center of it all is Helen Carter, a woman who was once called loveless by her own family, and who now quietly teaches others what love truly means. I read the article once, then again, and again, and when I finally set the laptop down I cried. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in my life the world wasn't mispronouncing me. By the weekend the inbox was full. Emails from women all over the state. Some from farther Illinois, Vermont, even one from Canada. Not inquiries, not applications, just stories. They poured in like rain after a dry season. I raised his kids. He married someone else and thanked me for my help. My son calls me overbearing. I raised him alone after his father disappeared. I gave my sister my wedding dress when she couldn't afford one. She never invited me to the ceremony. And over again the same final sentence. I thought I was the only one. That line broke something in me. Or maybe it restored something, the part of me that always feared I was a solitary wound. I wasn't. I was a mirror. And Emerson Lane was a home made of fragments that finally fit. It was 2 weeks later when Rachel showed up again. Unannounced. No call. No text. Just a presence at the front gate, silhouetted by the rising dusk. She looked different. Older. Not just in her face but in her posture. Like she'd finally realized the performance had ended and the curtain wasn't coming back up. She was holding something in her hands. A small envelope. "I'm not here to stay," she said. "I'm not here to fight." I didn't speak. Just waited. She held out the envelope. "I found this while cleaning out Mom's desk drawers. I think it was meant for you. Or maybe she meant for me to read it and never did." I took it carefully. Rachel didn't look away. "You were right," she said quietly. "About all of it." She glanced at the house, its windows glowing with soft lamplight. "I thought I knew what love was. What success looked like. But you built something I never could. And I don't just mean this house." Her eyes filled. Not with performative tears. Just something real. "You found a way to make your pain holy," she whispered. "I'm sorry I couldn't see you until it was too late." I didn't reach to comfort her. I didn't invite her in. But I nodded. Because I knew that apology was a gift I'd stopped needing long ago. But accepting it still mattered. Inside the envelope was a faded photograph. Me at 8 years old, wearing a crooked paper crown. Rachel beside me unwrapping presents. I was clapping. Smiling wide. The only one not looking at the camera. On the back, in our mother's neat handwriting, "Helen always celebrated others." I wish I'd taught her to celebrate herself. I placed the photo in the box with the others. Not because I needed it, but because it was time to stop erasing my own history, even the pieces that hurt. A month later, the magazine article was picked up by a mid-sized media blog. Then a podcast. Then a feature on a women's empowerment website. I never sought the spotlight, but suddenly it was peeking through the trees. And with it came letters. Handwritten ones. Dozens of them. One from a retired nurse who wrote, "They called me a spinster. Now I call myself sovereign." Another from a woman whose stepchildren kicked her out of the home she paid for. "I thought I was disposable. Until I found your story." I read it aloud to myself 3 nights in a row. just to believe it was real. And from a mother whose daughter blocked her after marriage, thank you for building a place where we are not just tolerated, we are treasured. One night, I hosted a candle vigil at Emerson Lane. Just a simple gathering.
No speeches.
No photos. Just 37 women, former guests, friends, strangers who had become sisters, lighting candles along the porch steps. We stood there in the dark as light bloomed between us. Each flame a story, a survival, a sentence that was once unspeakable, now held in gentle air. I lit the final candle, held it in both hands, and said aloud for no one and everyone, I was never loveless. I was just told love had to look a certain way, and I believed them. But not anymore. I still live alone. There's no husband, no children, no one to kiss my forehead each morning. But when I walk the halls of this house, I hear laughter from rooms I used to cry in. I see women dancing barefoot on the porch, their hair loose, their pasts no longer weapons but weathered maps. I see myself, not younger, not thinner, not better, just whole. Sometimes I sit at the garden bench near dusk. The wind moves through the trees like breath. The porch lights flicker on. The air smells like tea and second chances. And in those moments I remember every time someone told me I'd die alone, that no one would ever pick me, that I was just the sister, just the helper, just the spinster. But they were wrong, because I wasn't unloved. I was unseen. And now I am the proof that love can be built, brick by brick, woman by woman, from the ground up. My name is Helen Carter. They once called me loveless. Now I am a lighthouse, not for men, but for women like me, who were never lost, only waiting to be found by themselves.